So here's our fancy introduction. I'm always asked when this trip was taken, and when I went with my sisters to Mexico, and it was in April of 2008. And yes, it's almost coming up on 20 years pretty soon. So yeah, it's been a little while, but I think the Colonial City is still beautiful as far as I know. What I have heard more about Guanajuato, I'll tell you a little bit up to date as we go along. What's going on. So where is Guanajuato? First of all, the province includes the three cities we're going to talk about. And you see that it's northwest of Mexico City, which is right here. It's inland. It's high in the mountains, being like 7,000 feet. It's not one of the coastal cities, as Kathleen is saying, or Cancun or something like that. It was settled by the Spanish in the 16th century, and it really retains that Spanish Indian character. So to me, it's like going to the real Mexico. I mean, they're real people that live there. They have jobs. They push their baby strollers down the street. It isn't overrun with tourists. And even when we were there, and I'm not sure about what happens now, but very little English was spoken. So I went with my sisters, my two sisters, and each of us knew a little bit of baby Spanish, and we were able to get what we wanted. We found, not even in the airport did we find English. So we did find somebody in a tourist office in San Miguel de Allende was about the only English speaker we found on that whole trip, just so you're prepared for that. So this is what the state of Guanajuato looks like. The airport you fly into is the León, Guanajuato Airport. It's in between the two. It's about a 2-hour flight from Dallas, so it's very easily accessible from this part of the world. San Miguel is right down the road, about 30 miles, and Dolores Hidalgo is the third one that we hired a car for each of these, a car and driver to take us to each of these places. So Guanajuato was our first stop, being closest to the airport. It was settled in the 17th century, as I say, by the Spanish. 16th and 17th century. And what was the appeal there was silver mining. Remember, the Spaniards came to Mexico because they were looking for gold. And of course, they did find gold, mainly in South America, but they certainly found lots of gold in Mexico as well. So this particular area is very soft rock, and it was easy to mine. And so they did settle there and intermarried with the Indians who were there. And the city is known, this whole area is known for the Spanish colonial architecture that they brought with them. And it is a UNESCO World Heritage City, as are all three of these that we're going to look at. When I first looked at the map of Guanajuato, I just looked at it and could not figure out what the world this was. It is the most confusing map I had ever seen, and probably you're looking at it and have the same idea. Well, what I discovered was that these brown areas are tunnels. As I say, it's soft rock. So these are built under the city so that this main area in the middle is a pedestrian area. And these tunnels run under it. And if you're staying in a hotel, say in mid downtown, you can take a tunnel underneath it, and there will be a stairway up to the pedestrian main plaza. So our driver took us into a tunnel. We stayed over in this area within walking distance of the center city. We didn't have to hire any taxis or anything while we were in Guanajuato proper.
Are the tunnels for cars or people?
Cars. Yes, for cars, trucks, they'll take supplies to restaurants, they'll take people to hotels and so forth. But you don't, in the center city, you don't see any kind of traffic. You might see a car right at the edge of something, but basically that wheeled traffic is out of the main city. It's pedestrian. So that really makes it easy to walk down streets. You'll see people walking down the middle of the streets, and that's why they can. So it's a strange looking map, but it makes sense once you realize the topography of the area and what you're actually looking at. So that was the first thing. So the first page I wanted to show you was this down here. Now this little stairway goes down to one of those tunnels. So it opens up, and you can see there'll be cars going by down here. These are my two sisters. And they'll open up and let people out so that they can come up to the street level. So we booked an Airbnb. I'm sorry, it wasn't Airbnb. It was just a B&B back then. They didn't have all that, called Villa Suena Azul. And that means the blue house. I'm not seeing all that typing at the bottom. So I hope you can. So it was a blue bed and breakfast. It had about 5 bedrooms, and our hostess, Christina, knew very little English. She was studying, in her spare time, but she could say breakfast between 7 and 9. That's about the limit of her English. So this was the little living room we had and little patio, and there were some bedrooms here and upstairs. So we rented 2 bedrooms from her. This is me in much younger age and my 2 sweet sisters from Denver and Vancouver. We've seen some of Vancouver another day, and our breakfast in the little patio. All these colonial cities also are known for their color, and you're going to see colorful places everywhere we go. So if you're one of these drab people who like to dress in black and beige, this is not the place for you. You will see lots of colorful homes and fountains and murals and artwork all over the towns. So this is the little plaza that was closest to us and had a little fountain in, no water, but it had a fountain. And there's numerous plazas, even tiny ones all over town. This is just a little corner, and it's got its little fountain, a place to sit, and people will gather in the fountains. And even already you're starting to see some of the window treatments up on the hill. You see some of the colorful houses. You can go up to the top. There is a statue up there and a way to get up there. We did not do that, but you can get a nice view from that. So I'm reminded of the old song, Little Boxes on the Hillside. They're all made out of ticky-tacky. You remember that from the 60s and 70s? So that's kind of the way they are. But even the nicer ones downtown are different colors. So that's kind of different from what we're normally seeing. So this is the kind of architecture I'm talking about. Grill work, all kinds of little fancy stuff on it. So this is 17th century, 16th century. So we're talking what you might see in Spain. And of course, people, as I say, walking down the middle of the street. And I put some of these, and I guess you can see these better than I can, some of the translations for some of the signs you see. But this is our walk now into the city from our B&B. Different colored houses, the grill work, restaurants, shops, motorcycle. There is a car. This is on my screensaver today, my virtual background. And of course, they can make use of what they were had too. They have a little patio up there. I had this on for a while too. In April, the jacaranda trees, the purple trees, are in bloom. And of course, the bougainvillea blooms pretty much all year round, and it just takes over trees and buildings. So you see this all over, very, very colorful flowers and plants. It does get cool in the winter, mainly because of the altitude. It's about 6,000 feet. So it does get chilly, and you'll see fireplaces in rooms because it does cool off. But in April, it starts getting warm, about mid-April, and that's when their tourist season ends. You know, people come for the winter, and then they start leaving about April. So April was the earliest that we could get a reservation in these places. Little alleyways between people. You see some of the succulents that will bloom outside where there would be houseplants for us. The churches, of course, are what you go for if you're going to Spain or if you're going to this part of Mexico, colonial Mexico. This is the San Francisco church, the statue of Cervantes, a couple of views of it. This Baroque architecture is very common both in Mexico and in Spain. And the churches inside, of course, will match. We'll see a few of those, not that particular one. Here's another view down to one of the tunnels below. As we go along, we'll see all kinds of colors and architectures. We come into the main part of town, which is right here. So on our left, we see the Teatro Juarez, and there are different statues of performers and artists and musicians. And this is one of the main theaters in town. There are a couple of others. Next to it is one of the churches that we're going to come back to. And this is a hotel you can stay at, one of the main hotels. Directly opposite is the garden, the Jardin, which we'll see in just a moment. So this is the Teatro Juarez, excuse me, didn't mean to do that. And some of the famous figures on top. So this is the garden, the Jardin Union, and people will be sitting, and it seems to be always men who are sitting around looking in the shade of these big trees. Always fountains, always music. And you'll see vendors, usually the women, who are out selling stuff along the sidewalks on both sides. And the men either waiting to play, the musicians waiting to play. And there's always music in the garden. And some of them will be sitting around waiting with their instruments, waiting to be the next band up. So there's always music in the garden. So this is just a side view of the bay trees they are, and one of the streets adjoining it. Artists, of course, and all kinds of vendors. Just down a little bit is the University of Guanajuato. It's up kind of a big steep staircase. At least the entrance to it is. And next door to it is a museum where Diego Rivera lived at one point, and it does, we'll be looking inside that in a little bit as well. So this Museum of the Pueblo was the home of Diego Rivera, also very bright colors, of course. The woodworking is also something that you'll see a lot of in colonial Mexico. Beautiful carved wood and ceramics. Just some of the pretty things in that museum. And this is one of his wild murals. He did a lot of murals in Mexico City particularly, but certainly one of Mexico's famous artists. He didn't live in Guanajuato very long, but he did live here for a while. So anywhere you go, it's just a photographer's dream. You can point your camera in any direction and get beautiful pictures. At least I thought they were really charming pictures of something that doesn't look like the United States. It looks different, and it's certainly a pretty place to be. And the sisters in one of the plazas. So we're now in another main plaza, which is down the street a little bit from where we've been. And this is where the cathedral is. Cathedral is going to be here on my left, and we'll see several photographs of that. It's a little small. It's a kind of a triangle. And of course, people gather whenever there's a park or it's all full of restaurants. Here's the cathedral on one side and restaurants all along it. And this is the Cathedral of Our Lady of Guanajuato, begun in 1671, completed in 1696. So it's been here a while. And the interior, of course, had a little scaffolding, as many interiors do, but some of the beautiful Baroque, both chandeliers, the decorative arts, the altars. This is typical of a Spanish cathedral. They have the rose windows or small windows, and this is a carved door. An interesting little face on it, isn't it? So outdoors, just some of the children who were gathering around on the steps. And as we saw them, we saw one of these musicians who was on his way down to the garden to have his next gig. So just looking down the street from the garden, the cathedral being right here, just a side street. And across the way, we're going to see this restaurant in several pictures. We ended up eating there, and our waitress. So this is the Plaza de Paz, or the Plaza of Peace. There's our gal waiting for some customers. And they will be your typical Mexican food, not necessarily Tex-Mex. They do have enchiladas and things like that, but you will find fish and meat and things like that. More, I don't know what we would say traditional Mexican food is not Tex-Mex, it's something else. But there's lots of outdoor dining, as I say, because the weather is good almost all year round. I don't think you will find a more colorful city. We enjoyed this so much as photographers to see the color all over in everywhere we look. This man looks like he's sleeping on the job. I don't know if that's his wife next to him going to wake him up or not, but we had plenty of flower sellers as well.
So it really doesn't look crowded. And is that because it was April, or do you think it's just
partly it's not a big tourist destination for Americans. Mexicans go there as tourists.
Okay.
But it is not really visited a lot. You'll see groups. I mean, you might get a Rhodes Scholar trip there or something like that, but typically you don't see big tour buses and, huge throngs of people like you do at the resorts in Cancun and places like that. As I say, we never heard English spoken except on rare occasions. This is one of the other theaters off on a side street, the theater, the Principal Theater, it's called. And with this beautiful door. But yes, it's basically Mexican people who live there. So
It's
there's
gorgeous.
street food. This is one of the little stands and all kinds of good things that you can eat on the street. And one of our vendors here with the pretty colors silhouetted. And in the local market, of course, there's plenty of food, like food court kinds of things, the ambassador's market. But you can buy practically anything you want in this market, as in most markets. All kinds of fresh vegetables, of course, are grown in the area, and you see clothes for sale, and you'll see, you know, shoes and hats and whatever. These are some dried peppers, plants, all kinds of stuff. And the main big market is the Mercado Hidalgo. And this is a really beautiful building, as you can see. There's a sign on here that tells you a little bit about the Hidalgo building. And it was designed by Brunel, who did a lot of bridges and other kinds of architecture. He was well known. But
Mary, there have been a couple questions. One, like, did you take a food tour?
We were not on a tour. We were there on our own. We did all our own planning.
No, well, this was more, I think, about the food. One is, how did you know where it was safe to eat?
Well, you don't. We did not eat the street food, but there's plenty of it, as you can see. We ate in restaurants and we did not have any problem with the food. We stayed away from fresh foods. You know, really stayed with the cooked foods and bottled water or wine or beer. Didn't have any problem.
Okay.
So even good restaurants, that's something you need to be careful about eating in Mexico, or, you know, is not to drink the water. But if you drink bottled water or drink, you know, any of the liquor, you're fine. So
Okay.
this market spreads out onto the steps out ahead of it. And some of you have seen me with the hat. This is where I got the hat for $7. I've seen them for $35. I've also sewn this hat together now 3 times because it's literally falling apart. The little flowers on it were from my grandson, who was a toddler when he gave me that, the flowers for it. But this is the market where I bought that hat. Again, beautiful flowers everywhere. This was across the street from the market, another one of the colonial churches. And this is hard to see, but it's a statue of Don Quixote. With the background around it, it was just difficult to find a place to get a good shot of him. But here's his face if you can't find him, and his horse and his little sidekick. I did what I could to try and enhance that picture, but that was the best I could do. Lots of shops, and even just the doorways, and they were inviting, you know, to have things, so colorful places to go in were fun. Some shops we went into, some not so much. Another church, La Compañía, with the beautiful Baroque architecture. This is the interior of one of the Compañía church. Pretty plain compared to some we're going to see a little bit later. So away from our house on another day, we walked the other direction, not towards town, but away from town, and we came to this little park. Los acacia trees, had a little pavilion in it, just a neighborhood park, and we were right at the edge of town. So there's this reservoir, city reservoir, with a pump station and some boats on it. So it's just a quiet little neighborhood. So if you lived in Guanajuato, you might live in a house, something like this. Unless you live in one of those little ticky-tackies up on the hillside. This one on the right is one of the language schools. If you want to live there for a while, there are language schools both here and in San Miguel that you can go to, and be really have to use it every day, because it's you're not going to hear a lot of English, and give you a good chance to practice. Again, some of these blooming bougainvillea that even just climb up into the trees and take over everything. One of the fun things about going to Guanajuato is to go to the Calle Ganiatas, and this is the alley performance. They're known all over the world, and I think there's maybe one or two other places where they have these. But these are show. They have them in the music. They wait till it gets dark at night, usually maybe 10 o'clock. And in front of that church that I showed you that was next to the Teatro Juarez, people gather. And there's kind of a couple of steps down to it. So they gather around on the steps. And then they do their show. And then they start kind of a little parade through town, through the alleys, these little narrow alleys that you saw, to the Alley of the Kiss, which has a legend with it. And this is done every Friday and Saturday night. So if you're planning to go to Guanajuato, I would say definitely perform to be there on a weekend so you can take this in, because it's not to be missed. So these performers all dress in costumes from the 15th century, 16th century. I'm not sure exactly where, but as you see, they're gathering up in the square. And these were taken, I'm sorry, at night. So they're not always real clear or as sharp as I would like them to be, but they're the best I could do when it's total darkness. So even the children are dressed up. You'll see some lutes and some of the old time instruments, as well as guitars and bass fiddle. And they do carry that bass fiddle through the alleys. And people gathered up on these steps to watch this show. So they put on their show singing, and it's just a lot of fun, and people join in, they know the songs, and they clap and sing along, and everybody's having a good time. So then we go to the Callejón de Beso, which is the Alley of the Kiss, and this is up in one of the alleys. So I better go back there before I finish that. Okay, so the story, there's several ways that you can do the story of the legend of the Kiss. So let me see if I can find the one that's the one I've heard the most. Okay. Okay, the legend, this is the legend. Many variations is told about this alley. It's basically a Romeo and Juliet type of story. The girl from the rich family falls in love with the boy from the poor family. And you saw how close some of these alleys are that you can just almost reach across. So her bedroom has a balcony that nearly touches the balcony of his room across the alley. And of course, the parents don't want to have them be lovers, but they kiss across the alley. So Papa of the daughter finds out, and he wants to scotch this whole thing. So, in one of the versions, the father kills the lover. In any case, whichever legend you hear, whether they run away and are caught or however it is, it ends badly. So that's kind of the typical Romeo and Juliet. So at this point, they tell the story, and of course it's in Spanish, and we don't understand that, but we did read about it. So the Callendos show ends at the alley at the kiss. And if you're a present lover and you have your lover with you, if you kiss on the third step, that is to ensure your happiness. So father won't come after you. So we're going to go next to our next town, and we did hire a driver to take us to San Miguel de Allende. And this is the one most Americans go to. It has become kind of an American colony, an artist colony. But you'll see that it has a very different look from San Miguel than from Guanajuato. And we actually preferred Guanajuato as far as how colorful it was. So San Miguel has a little area that's walkable as well. And this is the central city, the garden and the cathedral are all right here. We were just down this street, about right off the square, and rented a whole house. There a little more information about it. Founded before 1541 by the Spanish. It was named after two Spaniards, Juan de San Miguel, and then a fighter in the war in the 1500 about colonization, Ignacio Allende. They ended up. So it just used to be San Miguel de Grande, I think it was. And then when they added Allende to it, it became San Miguel and Allende. So as I said, the artist colony grew here in the 20th century. There were some famous teachers who moved here, and students came, and they held classes and so forth. So even my sister, the one in Vancouver, is a painter, and she had come here previously and spent a couple of weeks with one of the painting schools. So there's a number of artists who live there, and a number of Americans who have houses here who come and stay for the winter or rent something for the winter. So it was an historical landmark really early on, and then became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, this center city in 2008, along with another church that we're going to see that's out in the country toward the end. So as you see, this is a very different look from Guanajuato. The houses are closed off pretty much on the streets. They may not be this color necessarily, but you'll see interior courtyards, but pretty drab on the street surface compared to Guanajuato. And you'll see too that they're cobblestone streets, very narrow sidewalks. When a car goes by, you've got to get out of the way because they come pretty close. It's very, very narrow streets. So they're not all that color, as I said. What's interesting about San Miguel, in my opinion, is the rooftop gardens. And we'll see a lot of those as we go through. And from our little house, we had views of that, and we'll see. So this has a main square too. Originally, it was a plaza that had a fountain in it, much like Mexico City, Zocalo, where it had a typical plaza in Mexico has the church, the cathedral on one side, and the government buildings on another side. You know, the governor's house maybe, or in this case, the police department, the mayor's office, and so forth. And then you'll see these arcades with shops. So this one, they eventually, in the 1800s, decided it was too hot to have a plaza like that, and they put in these trees. Now, these are the same kind of trees that we saw in that garden in Guanajuato. And I accidentally slipped and said what it was. Does anybody remember what kind of trees these were? You want to guess? Anybody? No takers? These are bay trees, like the bay leaves you use in your cooking. So they have very dense shade. You can see how close together they are, and they're trimmed up now. I'm not certain how they trim the tops of these. I have no idea, in fact. But they do provide very dense shade. So all these guys who have nothing to do during the day, they can stand around or they can sit under the shade tree in the garden. And we see a lot of that in Mexico. So here's some of these arcades that are along the plaza of the garden on either side. And this is the church that San Miguel is really famous for. It doesn't look like those other churches. And it started out being a typical Spanish church. It's a parroquia, which is not a cathedral, it's a parish church. The parish church of San Miguel of the Archangel. And it originally had a facade similar to what we saw in some of the other churches, but along in the 1800s, this church facade, the outside of it, was reconstructed with this very fancy Baroque kind of architecture around it. So it's a very different kind of church for Mexico. And the architect was Zeferina Gutierrez. And again, you see that we're at the square, and here is the police department and the city hall. And the police department also had horses as well as cars. So here's one of our policemen in his fancy outfit, tying his horse up by the square. And here are the men sitting in the square under the bay trees. I guess they have nothing else to do. But this church is interesting because it's on the highest point in San Miguel, and you can see it from all over, and particularly at night as it's lit up. And you can, as I say, you can see it from everywhere. This is one of the vendors just right in front of the church with the children. And they had things going on in this little plaza at night, as we found out one night. Coming out of a restaurant one night, we came out into absolute blackness, and all we could see was the lighted church. And what happened was that they were showing a movie in the square, and there was everybody with their baby carriages and their hot dogs and whatever. So this is the interior of the parroquia, the parish church of San Miguel. And along the sides, it has some of the Bible verses that we would be familiar with. One of the side altars. This is, I am the way, the truth, and the light. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. We've heard that. This is in Spanish. Statues of some of the saints, and this is a more modern one. Some of the murals. Right next door to it is a parish school. So there is a Catholic school there, and next to it is another church. So this is the Parroquia de San Miguel, lit up at night, really a beacon. You can see it from all over. Very pretty view. And of course, at night, late dinners, starting maybe 8, 9 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock. The musicians out in the square playing. This was one of the ones right in the square. Playing for diners. This is the church that's right next to the parroquia. Another one, San Rafael. Now, why would anybody build a church next to a church? I couldn't tell you. two churches right next to each other. There they are, this San Rafael and San Miguel de Archangel. So this is the statue in front of San Rafael, a much plainer church and much smaller church, however. And some of the streets. Now this is the street see, I can't even see the name of the dog, Carta.
Jesus Calle.
Calle means street, and LL is pronounced like a Y, Calle. So that means street, and this is the street that runs from the main square, the south from the main square. So we were the next street over. This was our street, Jesus Street. So we were just about a block and a half from the main square. We were on this side, about where this car is parked. So we rented this online. This is the view of the place right across the street from us and the rooftop garden, which we had a view of. So our place was called Casa Corazon, or the House of the Heart. And again, very colorful patio. Really interesting little house because it was owned by an American artist. It had a patio right in the middle of it. So this side, on this left side, was the living room, dining room, kitchen, and a little loft above the entranceway with another bed in it. And then this patio. And then over here, there were another little two-story house that had a bedroom and bath and a little sitting room. And then the same thing up above. So I had a double bed downstairs and the two girls had twin beds upstairs, but we each had our own bathroom. And then the stairs on this side went up to our rooftop garden, which is where I'm taking the picture from. So interesting, we had the whole house to ourselves. The maid came every day, brought fresh water for us and cleaned up after us and all that good stuff. So we cooked some of the things in-house, particularly breakfast, but ate out a lot of the time. But very colorful, and you could see, you know, from the other rooms out into the patio. So this is, I'm coming into the entrance. This would be, if I went straight ahead, I'd be going into the patio. Living room off to the right here. So this is a view of the living room, and some of the artwork then in the house is the work of this owner of this house.
Was this, well, in 2008, was there Airbnb then? Or was this through something else?
It wasn't an Airbnb. They didn't have that then. But people did rent out homes that they owned there. And this was owned, as I say, by an American who rented out, and we just got it on the internet. Both places we rented them. I rented them on the internet.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah, we were very, very happy with both of them. And, you know, here we have the whole place to ourselves. Here you see some more of her artwork, these little Mexican type windows and glass in the windows. And this goes up to that little loft that's above that entranceway with another bed in it. So this is the dining room, and this would look out on the patio. I think this was taken at night, again, with the fireplace, because it does get cold in the wintertime. And they rent them over the winter for people who want to escape the North American winters. You see the blue from the patio, and looking from the kitchen into the dining room, into the living room. So this is the little house across the way, our little sitting room of the downstairs and the bedroom. And with my little, this is the upstairs sitting room and their bathroom and twin beds and their little fireplace and sitting area. So it was very, very well done. As I say, we had somebody come in. So we had this over the living room area was the rooftop garden. So we could see all of our neighbors and saw them out watering their plants on their rooftop gardens. So it's kind of fun. This is our view. You see how close we are to the church. And this little picture I had of this down below, but you see the lady out here watering her plants. But as you look around the streets, it's fun to look up and see all the things that are growing on the rooftops. We found that fascinating. So this is, again, from the rooftop, we're up pretty high. As I say, the church is on the highest point in the town. And looking down, very hilly, about 6,000 to 7,000 feet in this area. So these are just some of the shops in the main square area. This one had a lot of antiques, like old buggies and different things that you would see of an older era. Just peeking in their doors, some antique furniture and paintings and things. mainly just for the color. This is just one of the doorways, the cart. This is one of my favorite pictures. I have a big poster of this hanging in my hallway, my stairway rather, looking into a hotel, not just this peak, you know, from the street looking into a courtyard with the flowers and everything. So the outside may be kind of drab looking, but inside is where the action is. Another church, the Church of the Immaculate Conception. And we didn't go in this one. This is just along the side, another one of the food courts. I'm looking at that dome of it and looking across my sister, taking a peek out their window. And across next to it was the Institute of Fine Arts. And you can see that church from there. It's just kind of next door to it. So this is one of the places where art students might come to this art institute where they have classes and a little cafe. And in some places they have the murals, like we saw the Diego Rivera murals. And they give you pictures of Mexican life, so they're not stylized into beautiful women or things like that. Here's the devil out to get you. Another view across that courtyard at the Institute of Fine Arts. And of course, you have to go to the local markets. This is what a market would look like. And they do have souvenirs, of course. But you also have people doing the normal things that they would do in a local market, like these ladies who are making juice out of the prickly pear cactus. They're cutting it up. They'll be ground up into juice and fermented probably. Another one of the churches, a lovely bell tower for this one. Two people outside the church, older people. This is one of the restaurants that we went to, just saw it during the day, and we went back in the evening. They had a band, of course, so most of them have music, again, taken with zero light, so not really a good quality picture. Another one of the pretty churches, San Francisco, and its pretty dome. This is that street that runs down from the market is on the other side. Another little square, Soledad. There were some school children having a play or something going on over there and at this church. One of the shops that we went into, it had an art gallery and this pretty plaza, a little patio in the middle. It's just fun to poke around in these places. They're all really pretty. And of course, if you have something to haul back, some of these, they'll ship it for you if you can't. Okay, again, we hired a driver to take us out to the town of Dolores Hidalgo. And again, Dolores was just called Dolores at one time, but it had gained a name from Father Hidalgo, who was a revolutionary in 1810 when they had the revolt against Spain and became independent. So this is where his home was. It seemed like we did not go into the home at this point. For some reason it was closed, but we did go in the patio and had our picture made there. But he is prominent in the town, and the hero of the town, his statue is in the square, of course. And the square being like the typical square that we see with the colonnades on each side, the church on one side, the government buildings, you know the story. So we have the garden, we have the colonnades. We have some school children who are there on a school trip. And in the middle of this one, there's a little gazebo, which is kind of big Victorian looking. And one of the favorite things to do in this little central park is to go get ice cream. Now I'm going to spend just a minute for you to look at some of the flavors, because you can get con leche, you can get a cerveza. And I think most of us know what that is, a little beer flavored, or mango or pistachio or pina colada. Lots of flavors that we normally wouldn't associate with ice cream. So if you're into ice cream, you have a lot to choose from. This was our guide who brought us over. This is again the parish church, not a cathedral, but a parish church of the Lady of Sorrows.
You know, everything looks so clean.
Well, not so much. I think you'll see paint chipped off and you'll see trash and things like that. Some things are better kept up than others, but some things are run down. Just depends where you're looking. We happened to be there at noon, and here is the bell ringer ringing the bell in the tower.
Oh, wow.
Now, this is the church that I thought was really exceptionally beautiful. It must have been a wedding or something there because it was covered in flowers. I mean, I've never seen that many flowers in a church. And beautiful wood carving on all of the walls and side panels and additional side chapels all over. Really a beautiful, beautiful church in Dolores. And look at the benches, all carved wood and these over here. And one of the things I've never seen in a church is parquet floors. I can't think of another one. This is looking toward the main altar. You see some of the detail in the main altar. Looking up at the dome, the organ. But this is the main altar. And if you look hard, you can see, well, the Lady of Guadalupe, which is the patron saint of Mexico, but all kinds of other saints kind of buried in all this frou-frou. So very elaborate carvings, and these would be wood. As I say, the ceramics are very, very popular in this region. In fact, Dolores is probably responsible for about half of Mexico's exports of ceramics are made in this town. Probably half the people are somehow involved in the ceramics industry. So there's some here in this little ceramic shop that we stopped at, all kinds of ornaments and anything you might buy in a Mexican store or restaurant exported to the US and to the tourist areas along the coast. These big iguanas, I had one, bought one at this time, a small one, put it in my garden, but various critters broke all the legs and tail off of it. And he was pretty bad. So my last trip to Mexico, just before the pandemic last year, I bought one of the large ones. So he's doing all right in the garden. He's not eating any bugs, unfortunately. So this little restaurant that we went to had some of these ceramics, as you see in the front area where you just come in. This would be a picture, of course, of Father Hidalgo and fighting off in the insurrection. So the stop that we made going back to San Miguel, and this is our last stop, by the way. We did stop at a swimming pool, but I'm not going to show you that, just a swimming pool. This is a pilgrimage church. And the person who started this was Father Luis, who had a vision. You know, some of these churches or shrines come to people because Jesus told them to do it or somebody told them to do it. It was one of those kinds of things. So it was built in the 1800s and is a very popular pilgrimage site, the sanctuary Atotomilco, and it's now 250 years old in 1988. So it's been here quite a while. As I say, it's part of this UNESCO site that is part of the San Miguel heritage UNESCO heritage site that was given to them in 2008. So they're kind of partners in that same one. What is really interesting about this church, though, is an artist who painted the ceiling. It's called the Sistine Chapel of Mexico. And you can see even from here that every inch of this church is covered in paintings. And they were all done by this artist, Martinez de Poca Sangre. And he spent 30 years of his life painting every inch of this church. And they're quite detailed, as you can see, with pictures from the Bible. And everywhere you look, there are these paintings. And even these paintings on the walls, he did the paintings directly on the wall, and then they tacked these frames around them. This is one of those little side chapels that are all along the side, family chapels. If you had some money, you often did this in one of the churches. But again, they're painted on the wall and then frames around them. So it's part of the World Heritage Site, the Santuario Atotomilco, and was our last stop, apart from going to the swimming pool. So this is our end of our trip to Mexico. And if you've not been to this part of Mexico, you see it's not like the Cancun or Puerto Vallarta even, but a really charming place to visit. And if you can go in the wintertime, like March or April, I think you'll find the climate really good. It was starting to get warm when we were there in April. So the tourism was starting to fall off a little bit, the rentals. So thank you for coming with me to Mexico.
Wow, we do have quite a few questions. and comments. Let's see.
This.
Well, I hope Florence figured out how to hear the program. I did just notice that. Let's see. Oh, Stan said that Budapest has tunnels under their city, under it.
They do. They built their underground, subway, the first in Europe. It was just one long thing that went under the main street. It's still there from the early 1800s, I believe. But yeah, they do have tunnels too. I guess it's able to do it because of the topography there.
Jack was wondering if the tunnels you were talking about were originally flood control to reroute the river.
No, they were used exactly what they're used for now, to provide a way for vehicles to go through. And of course, it might even have been horse and buggy originally, before cars even, but it was soft enough to do that. They just wanted to have a central place that didn't have a lot of vehicular traffic.
And when were those built, the tunnels?
The 1800s.
Wow,
yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Been mining there for several hundred years, and they knew that that was soft enough rock that they could easily make those tunnels through there, so they did.
Well, and that would have such an impact on the quality of life.
Yeah, it does.
That's impressive.
It does, I think.
Yeah. So here's a comment that Diego Rivera was married to Frida
Kahlo.
Yeah.
Yeah, Frida Kahlo, yeah. A very tumultuous marriage. Both artists and both wanted things their own way, pretty much. And he was a womanizer, but he was the love of her life, much older than she was.
Is Frida the one that had the unibrow?
Yeah.
I thought that was, all right.
She's a famous artist in her own right. She wasn't at first, it was Diego who was the big man, but and had the big commissions and stuff. And she was not well known until much later. She died very young. She had been in an accident, I think a car accident or some kind of accident, train or something, but she was disabled and in pain really all her life, and died young.
Goodness.
Yeah, Diego was running around on her like from day one. So it was a sort of a strange marriage. They couldn't live with each other or without each other.
Oh, goodness. Let's see. Oh, here is a note from Stan and Sandra that to make sure you were the one to crack the cap of a bottle of water or soda.
To crack it? What do you mean to crack it?
Sandra?
Open it up. You make sure you're the one that opens it up. If you don't take one that's already been, when you
watch them open it at the table. Very often they'll do that.
No, we watched them open it, but it had been opened before.
And we got sick.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. You have to, because it looked like he was opening it, but they had refilled them.
Ah, I see. Very clever, huh?
Let's see. Okay. And that Stan and Sandra also know a bead artist who goes there in the winter. And that they also saw squares like the ones you were showing with the arches, the city hall in 15th century Poland.
Yeah. Well, they're modeled after, these towns are modeled after the Spanish towns too, where they have a central plaza and the cathedral and the government building. That's kind of the way they do. And South America is the same way. They're modeled after that Spanish, that European style. Right. The Zocalo, where you have the Plaza de Armas, which is the central plaza. And if you have an insurrection, you come and gather the arms, the weapons in the plaza in the middle. But yeah, some of them started planting these gardens. They got to be too hot, just sitting out in the sun. So you plant these nice big shade trees and the men can sit around doing nothing all day.
Maybe those men sitting under the trees all day are the musicians at night?
Some of them are. Yeah. In all fairness, some of them are. And we saw some with their instruments, to be all fair. Yeah.
Okay, I lived in Greece many, many years ago where the men would all sit all day in the square playing backgammon.
Yeah.
The women made breakfast, made lunch, made supper, worked in the stores, put the kids to bed. The men went out to eat dinner with each other. You never saw the women at all. So it's just a tradition of the way some people live.
It's a different society.
Yeah.
Any other things I can answer?
Well, there was a comment by Carol. She said she'd been to Mexico, but never to this area, and that it was so beautiful and that you take gorgeous pictures, and that it was so interesting, and she thanks you for it.
Well, it was someplace I always wanted to go to. I'd been to Mexico before as well. But it's not like the border towns or even Mexico City. You know, it's just, if you've been other places in Mexico, this is different.
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to tell you something I heard about recent Guanajuato news. And that is that they're having a lot of problems there with cartels and uprisings and that sort of thing. Actually, we had kind of heard some of that rumbling even when we went. It's always been a place around that area where they grew marijuana. And of course, now that it's not illegal in every place in the United States, I think there are some problems with the economy that's dependent on shipping it to the US that's maybe not as much market anymore. So anyway, there are some problems there. And I can't give you an update on Americans being affected by it. We certainly, even though we kind of knew about some of that before we went, didn't seem to be affected by it.
Okay. David was wondering what was the total number of days of your trip to Mexico?
I think we spent about 10 days there altogether.
Okay. And how did you flew in, didn't you say, to that airport?
We had a nonstop flight from Dallas to the Leon, Guanajuato airport.
Okay.
And then arranged our transportation in the airport with some difficulty because no one spoke English, to get us a driver to drive us to into town to Guanajuato, which is, you know, a little ways out from the airport. And then again in Guanajuato to San Miguel. So, but we arranged all those. The drivers drive like maniacs on those mountain roads. So just close your eyes. And
so did you arrange the drivers from the States, or you actually found them there?
We found those there. We did arrange, of course, the airfare and the 2 places that we stayed, but we did the drivers there. We weren't with any tour company or anything like that. We did all the arrangements ourselves and went where we wanted and where we had time to. And if we want to take a nap, we did.
So how did you find the driver and the car? I mean,
well, we went to an information booth at the airport. And as I say, we each knew a little bit of Spanish, and we were able to ask for a driver. Oh, yeah. They could get us a driver, and found one for us. They had an information tourist bureau on the square in San Miguel. And that was the only person that we ran into actually that spoke English. And he found us a driver and taking us to Dolores and also taking us back to Guanajuato. And that driver was also a very good guide. You know, he showed us about the ice cream and took us to the church on the way, the Atonomilco, and the swimming pool. You know, we stopped for a swim. But, you know, drivers were very good, except they drove too fast. That's all.
Okay. One other question. Could you use dollars or only Mexican pesos?
We use pesos, no dollars. And I couldn't speak for today because this has been a while out. You know, my last trip to Mexico was a year ago, the first week in March, just as everything closed down. And we never changed anything into pesos, but it was Cabo San Lucas and Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan. I mean, they're used to these cruise ships and they take dollars. This is a different deal. You know, this is, as I said, the real Mexico. They use pesos, and we did change money in the airport to pesos.
And how did you find you were treated? Were they glad you were there, or?
It really wasn't much of an issue. We, as I say, they're not used to having a lot of tourists around. We were just other people walking around. I mean, people basically ignored us. We went to a restaurant, it'd be like you went to a restaurant here, you know, it wait on you and give you, you know, you like the music or something, and you give them a tip and they say adios. So, but we were just people there, just like any.
Nice.
It was. I didn't feel like we were tourists that they were catering to us. We were just normal people who happened to be there.
Okay. Does anyone else have something?
Yeah, you said you went to Mazatlan, and one of Stan's friends lives there, and he's trying to get us to come. Is there any praises to sing or any reason to go there? Or
well, we did a short trip from a week cruise from San Diego on that one, partly because my sister from Denver has a terminal cancer. And we wanted to do something while we knew she could still travel and not wait until like last fall. And then of course, everything fell apart and now we're stranded. My other sister's in Canada. We can't even go see her in Denver. So that was really our reason to just do something easy for us. We'd all been to Mexico before. We all spoke a little Spanish, but we could just hang out. We got a nice three-person suite with a balcony, and we could, on rainy days, we watched movies, and it was just very relaxing. So that was really our reason for taking that particular one. I had not been to Cabo, but I'd been to the other two. Sister from Denver they used to go to Cabo all the time. So that was no big deal for them. So that, you know, we'd all been to that area before. So, but it was kind of fun to be back. I had not been in quite a while. A lot of changes, a lot of growth. You know,
specifically Mazatlan, the town, or I don't know if it's a city or is it a?
We took a little tour of Mazatlan. The girls just walked through town a little bit. They didn't want to do as many tours. They did the boat tour. We did a glass bottom boat tour in Cabo.
How far away is that?
From where?
Mazatlan.
Mazatlan. It's a day. So it was 2 days from San Diego to Puerto Vallarta, which is the most southern. Then the next day we were in Mazatlan. The next day we were in Cabo, and then we were another day at sea to San Diego.
Okay.
I just wanted to say San Miguel.
Pardon me?
Has a lot of Canadians.
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear that.
San Miguel has a lot of Canadians as well.
Snowbirds.
We know Canadians who have places there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, anytime I mention Americans going somewhere for the winter, I'm certainly including Canadians in that. I know how that goes. Yeah, the Canadian sister and Canadian friends, so I know how that goes.
Right.
Well, that's great. Well, you know what? It's actually 7 o'clock. And so... No, that's okay. I was watching the time, and this was just so interesting. My recipe will stay for another time. So
we just have some good Canadian news. They are getting everybody second shots like crazy. So we got shot a month early, so things should be opening up sooner rather than later.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because in my family, you know, my sister and I would both like to go to Denver to visit my sister.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how much longer she's going to be around, and we would like to see her, you know. It's time for that. But at least we got that one trip in. And as we came back on the 7th of March, they had already quarantined that one ship that they wouldn't let dock. You remember?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but that was a very nice cruise. If you like just a relaxing week with you know, it wasn't real expensive. You can fly in and out of San Diego the same day. You don't have the hotel. You know, it was an ideal trip for us at that time. And we got it sort of last minute because we didn't want to wait.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you went.
We are
That's good.